Bill Finnegan is the Vice President of Enterprise Technology Solutions at GP Strategies. He has over 10 years of e-learning experience, and his focus at GP Strategies is on supporting enterprise learning technologies, including learning management systems, learning content management systems, as well as portal tools and business intelligence products. Bill and his team support strategic customers ranging from the Internal Revenue Service to Nike and BMS, providing services related to GP Strategies' major enterprise learning application partners. Additionally, Bill's team is responsible for GP Strategies' managed services hosting practice, providing enterprise application hosting at GP Strategies' Tier 1 data centers. He received his BBA from Loyola University, Maryland, and an MBA from the University of Baltimore, and he currently serves as an adjunct professor at Loyola University, Maryland. So with that, that was a mouthful. I will, Bill, turn that over to you now, and I will make you the presenter. You can go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Kayla. Welcome, everyone, to our session today. Hopefully you will find this information helpful. I'm noticing from the poll that was already posted that the majority of you are here to learn about best practices. So I'm going to spend as much time today as I can to help those of you on your journey to a SuccessFactors rollout to make that rollout a success. From an agenda perspective, I'm going to go after this from a number of different approaches, and please feel free to ask questions throughout. The first thing that I'm going to be touching on is current trends in human capital, and then really look at how those are changing due to a stronger push from a mobile perspective as well as a social collaboration perspective. We'll be looking at different impacts on your organizations as you are doing a talent rollout, and then get into the meat of the discussion, which is really around the how to handle this from a global perspective. One of the things you'll hear me say throughout today's session is the concept of thinking globally and acting locally. So that comment will come up throughout the different slides as we're looking to really address the best way to roll out the talent services across an organization, as well as making sure that we're ready for a global approach. As questions do come in, I'll be incorporating them into the discussion. One of the first questions that I received was related to what do I view acting locally as. So I'll answer that before I get into the current trends. When we get into the discussion of acting locally, the main focus is going to be on how you are managing things from a regional perspective. So I do thank you guys from that perspective. I'll get to the regional rollout component shortly, but please feel free to continue to ask questions throughout. When I look at current trends, one of the things that I like to do, and that you've probably seen in a number of different presentations, is statistics. Obviously, people interpret some of the charts and graphs that they see in presentations like these in different ways. But I chose this slide related to some of the bursting information, really to focus on predominantly the reasons that most of you are rolling out SuccessFactors, and that really is around how organizations are concerned about the amount of talent that they have in the organization and how that talent is being mentored and allowed to grow within different organizations. So most organizations, we are seeing an increase in employee development and training. In 2013, most of the statistics would show around a 15% increase overall. But then when you look at larger organizations, more mature organizations tend to spend close to 40% more per learner than their less mature counterparts. I see a question related to this slide in terms of what makes a more mature learning and development organization. My answer to that typically you will see from a larger organization perspective that has essentially a retiring workforce. When you look at the amount of dollars that need to be spent in a talent perspective for larger, older organizations, you're seeing a move towards retirement from the baby boomers that is resulting in the need for more ad hoc training as well as collaboration as the workforce changes. When I look at that in context, so again, thank you for the question. When I look at that again in context to some of the different trends, as I mentioned in my answer to the second question there related to retirement of the workforce, we're also seeing a big push to a contingent workforce. So as the workforce continues to grow, we're seeing a push to almost a split truly between contingent workers and full-time workers. And then really a need for engaging technologies. Some of your organizations are looking at things like bring your own device, where employees are looking at how to best leverage the tools and functions that they have. There's a need for a quote-unquote Facebook-type approach to the different types of learning that is out there and different types of technologies, and that's led to the need for more engaging interactivity, which you see now within SuccessFactors with the use of JAM to really enhance the overall experience. One of the other pushes that you've probably seen across your implementation, if you haven't implemented or if you've attended other sessions and conferences related to SuccessFactors, is really the push for big data. For those of you that are SAP customers, you're seeing a push towards HANA, but really how different organizations like yourselves are demanding more analytically driven results out of your system. What you are putting into the system now across these different applications is driving the need to have more robust reporting, and we pull that need into the best practices slide as we get later into the deck. Additionally, you're seeing a push towards accountability across the organization, which is requiring the need for additional documentation, additional processes and workflows to be put into the system. And now that most organizations are addressing this from a perspective of here's how talent fits in within my organization, we also need to make sure that we're looking at it from a trackability and traceability perspective. As you all know, SuccessFactors is a software as a service platform, which is now truly the majority of all enterprise implementations. This is allowing you to have more frequent upgrades. For those of you that are life sciences organizations and validated environments, you're seeing that on an annual basis. For those other organizations, you are typically seeing it on a quarterly basis. And that's really impacting how you're doing the rollout, because it's impacting then how you're retraining and recertifying your professionals. As I mentioned earlier, with the big push towards mobile and tablets, it's impacting how the systems are being used, and really understanding that is going to be key when we get into a discussion of best practices, because understanding both the platform that individuals are going to use to access SuccessFactors, as well as how you are informally training them and allowing them to collaborate, will be key. As we're getting into some of those items, I see a question around mobile and social. One of the key differentiators that I've always seen with the SuccessFactors platform is the SAP JAM product and its integration across the different functions and features. For those of you who are not using SAP JAM, I highly recommend that you take a deeper dive look at it just to see how it fits and ties within the overall structure and approach of a full-scale rollout of SuccessFactors. Looking at some of these additional trends around mobile, I think it's really key to look at some of the numbers. The research that we're seeing is showing mobile workforce essentially surpassing 1.3 billion people by 2013, or getting closer to 40% of the overall workforce. However, when you look at the different assets related to how training is being pushed out as part of your talent rollout or as part of your HCM rollout, only about 12% of the learning assets are mobile enabled, which is impacting how you're preparing your users for a larger global SuccessFactors rollout across all the different modules. Now, at the same time, there's a larger push from organizations to get more mobile ready, but in some situations, you're seeing that mobile push at the same time that you're rolling out, for example, the recruiting module or succession or workforce planning analytics. So really looking at how you are doing your strategy for mobile, not only for learning, but for educating individuals as you're rolling out talent, really isn't optional, and it's becoming more mandatory for larger organizations as they're trying to essentially implement while at the same time changing the engine mid-flight. I mentioned JAM, and the reason why I mentioned JAM is the tie-ins and components from the collaboration perspective that we see from our customers doing global rollouts that benefit and leverage either JAM or tools like JAM allows for a cleaner and tighter integration, as well as more collaboration related to the tools as they're being used, what's the best way to use the tools, what are some tips and tricks on how to use them. And then you also get into the concept of the millennial and the millennial generation in terms of the ease of access, ease of use of device to ensure that they're ready for the workforce. I always tell my students at Loyola, like I'll ask them to look something up, and I'll go to my computer in the classroom and I'll pull up Google, and they've already gotten information directly from their phone. So when we look at some of these different collaboration tools, I highly recommend using them, and you'll see that in the best practices related to leveraging communities of practices that are available, blogs, wikis, et cetera. As I move on to the next slide, which is good. Just there is an earlier question here on reporting analytics that I wasn't able to get to related to big data. The key that we're seeing with all the information you're now able to store within a full SuccessFactors implementation across the multiple modules is how to make sure that you're analyzing the data. So the question that I saw that was posted was really around how to understand and analyze that data. For me, when we're looking at this for our implementations, it's around how we are ensuring that ad hoc requests are being met, how you are looking at both the inherent out-of-box reporting capabilities across the modules, as well as how you are setting up your data warehousing and reporting structure overall. Reporting has tended to have been an Achilles heel for all HCM organizations. The later, more current releases of SuccessFactors have added more reporting capabilities, but it is still key to make sure you are looking at where your single source of employee data is and how you're going to leverage that data to ensure that you're getting the most out of your overall implementation. So let's talk a little bit about this as it relates to the overall impact to your organization. What I mean by impact to the organization is how is a rollout of talent going to reduce complexity of your user experience? What are you doing right now that you're going to be able to do better once you've completed your SuccessFactors implementation, once you've rolled out talent overall? And what are you then going to do to both capture and leverage that data? Otherwise, you wouldn't be making the investment in licenses, in services, and in support for a global rollout. It comes back to that concept that I mentioned. I see a question here if I've ever used the term global for thinking globally and acting locally. While I chuckle at that, I do look at it from the perspective of if we are looking at the complexity of the user experience, we're really seeing the need, especially from a SuccessFactors perspective, to have a heavy focus on branding, both tightly integrated across the corporate branding that you have as an organization, as well as ensuring that you are presenting in a localized interface by leveraging language packs, as well as a regional focus in terms of how the user experience needs to be managed, not only to fit corporate goals and objectives, but at additional needs. Now, as I'm looking at this again from a capturing and leveraging data, when you look at, and I think just the image, while just being a standard boilerplate image for a slide, shows a global approach. I think it's really key when I look at it from a perspective of where is my data sitting? Where am I getting, how am I collecting different regional data? How am I using that data both to impact the organization overall as well as to impact the organization from a localized perspective? So how are you going to use this information to make sure the SuccessFactors implementation is successful? What are the key drivers that you're going to see from a global perspective? I've seen the question here related to looking at what do I mean by acting localized? Now, most of you that are doing a global rollout are familiar with the language packs that are available and the complications that you tend to see thereof related to how we are going to then leverage additional translation services. What truly does localization mean? For me, what we've seen that is the most successful for our global customers is a regional review of the interface decisions as they're being made. Look and feel is very important. Some of you probably based your decision on the product in terms of how intuitive the SuccessFactors interface is. So the more that you can get your regional input into those sites really is going to be a key in terms of ensuring success. Another is essentially having realistic expectations from a timeline perspective. A number of organizations, like some of those of you on the phone, try to compress as much into your implementation, as much into your schedule as possible. When you are rolling out a global talent platform, especially a multi-module platform like SuccessFactors, the more that you take your time to really approach the overall schedule and map correctly to the order that the module should be implemented, it will truly help you, for obvious reasons, if you're going to be changing your HR system at the same time while rolling out SuccessFactors, mapping the dates together from that perspective, how you're going to time that with, say, rolling out Employee Central, et cetera, is really key to putting that both current state roadmap together as well as that future state. So that starts to lead me into the bulk of this presentation in terms of why you're here, in terms of our interpretation of truly what are best practices as you are looking to do the implementation. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this slide because I'm going to walk through each of these 10 with obviously a little bit more detail than you're seeing in just these bullets. So the first thing that I always start with in the discussion is around a transition strategy. Now, some of you are going to SuccessFactors as your first implementation of a human capital management platform, while others are migrating from what I typically refer to as a Franken system, where you have a large number and collection of different sites or different applications that you've cobbled together somewhat to handle the different aspects of HCM. What we recommend is essentially to start with what we tend to provide is a whiteboarding session that just maps out at a high level truly what the overall transition plan is, how you are addressing both your current state, how you are addressing your future state, and essentially what is a successful go-live launch look like. So from that perspective, I tend to recommend, related to item 1, that you truly document the high-level goals and objectives of your current state, not your future state, of your current state, in terms of what you are currently doing and why you are doing in the way that you are. This will allow you to map from a transition strategy to the future state goals so that you can see what your goals are for day 1 from go live, from day 60 post go live to day 365 post go live, as you are looking at ensuring that you are having a successful transition approach. As most of you are aware on the calls, as a number of you have been through numerous amounts of enterprise application deployments, there is a huge need from an advisory board perspective to, again, have that global focus. A number of our customers are either running out of the UK or the US and making decisions for their other regional outposts in different countries, and have done a great job of setting up advisory boards to ensure that leads are from each of the different regions are involved. It really becomes key when you're looking at the success rate of the rollouts. Not having a global advisory board is going to cause some regions to feel that they are force-fed with decisions that have been made, and that really does not allow for true strong adoption, nor does it allow for what I roll into related to item 3, which is the concept of governance. The governance on a global implementation is even more critical than on a domestic-based rollout, predominantly because of the cultural differences that you're going to see in terms of impacts of changes in an environment, both from perceived usage and usability of the system to understanding of really how you're going to manage, say, for example, the quarter releases that you're going to be forced to, I don't use the word endure, but forced to leverage. The next best practice that I talk to, I make number 1 when I'm talking with our validated customers and our life science customers, but is easily in the top 5 for all customers overall, which is the testing and QA. Now, some would say the testing and QA is not as essential for a SaaS environment versus a behind the firewall app or vendor-hosted application. When we look at the Q&A components for SaaS, really what it gets into is making sure that your end users and your functional representatives, your subject matter experts within your regional groups have a deep understanding and is deeply tested from a non-technical perspective. The question that just popped up is what do I mean by non-technical representatives? What I mean by non-technical representatives are going to be those people that are your super admins or your users that are beyond your tier 1 support. Ensuring that they are involved in the testing and QA process is going to allow for successful handling of tickets and support requests as they're coming in. Now, the next item that I talk about in terms of the best practices is truly a focusing on pilots. And what I mean by that is keeping an eye on the modules that you aren't currently purchasing in terms of how their advancements will better the tools that you currently have. A number of our customers, for example, haven't rolled out Jam, and I've suggested, encouraged, I don't want to say forced, but motivated them to look at Jam even just from an evaluation perspective to see if it helps, especially geographically. Additionally, from a pilot perspective, we tend to recommend if you're doing your rollout in one region and slowly rolling out across the board is find a subset of users in the regions to kick the tires first. I always find it much easier to get people to leverage tools like recruiting on a smaller scale within a region to see how it's functioning, to see how it's working properly before going out to the general masses, which obviously then leads into item 6, really is around your business processes. What is your change management policies overall? How are you going to manage your formal change management across the site? Because at some point you're going to want vendors like us to go away and to ensure that you've got the successful care and feeding of the system after you've gone live. And that becomes even more critical when you're looking at it from a global perspective. I had a conversation with a customer this morning that's looking at support ticket rollouts across 3 different regions, and the different spikes and volume that they're seeing in those regions for their current system. And we walked through what really to look at from a new system rollout in additional regions as you're getting both user adoption to a new system as well as user adoption to how the change needs to manage, how control will be given in terms of determining which features to enable, which features not to enable, and how to best manage those quarter releases. Again, feel free to continue to post questions as we are progressing through, and I'll continue to try to cleanly integrate across the board. I did have a question that came in terms of whether or not the system is flexible enough for differences in global implementations related to legal requirements as well as cultural differences. The answer to that at a high level is yes, provided that the proper decisions are made up front. What I mean by that is for those of you that are looking at your implementation that have already gone through it, you're familiar with the configuration workbooks. For those of you that are not, and for the party asking this question, if you haven't gone through that, the configuration workbooks step you through each of the configuration decisions that you can make on the site. The earlier on that you know that the system is going to be rolled out to a global audience, the easier it's going to be to ensure that the features are compliant with different regions. Now, you're going to get into, from a global perspective, different questions around where is my data stored, which data center am I located out of. I've got, say, for example, safe harbor requirements in EMEA. Can I ensure that I'm going to have that hosted in EMEA? What are some of the different legal requirements in terms of data storage? When you're looking at some of the forms and processes related to that, it allows you to make a lot of those decisions up front. I tend to recommend a separate workshop outside of the configuration workbooks to look at global requirements and specifically around any legal requirements from a country-to-country basis, which becomes key when you get into any of the data, heavy data modules, as well as into some of the recruiting components. So again, thank you for the question. Please feel free to continue to answer them. If I did not answer the question, please send me a follow-up, and I'll try to embed it in additional responses. One of the key items as we moved on to number 7 is around keeping IT engaged. I've gotten into arguments over this with people over time related to the fact that this is a software as a service rollout. That's the key to software as a service. IT doesn't need to be involved. That's really not the case. When we look at the need for IT, it's more of a change in focus to have IT as your trusted advisor related to how you are going to embed SuccessFactors into your single sign-on strategy, how you're going to ensure that the data feeds between systems are working properly, because in essence, even with software as a service rollouts, having IT engaged is going to allow for the successful upkeep of the system as different systems need to be integrated into the overall process. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times related to the concept of the quarterly updates. Again, this is for non-life sciences or validated customers, but SuccessFactors rolls out quarterly releases that bring out additional features and functionality more frequently than you would see with a a more traditional legacy approach. I recommend creating a process early on and establishing your plan for how you are reviewing each of those new quarterly releases. This will allow you to ensure that anything existing that you have will not change, and if it does change, that you're ready for that, both from a documentation perspective and a process change for employees, as well as making sure that you're doing a true impact analysis for new functionality. Why is that key? Is a question that came across. That's key really just to ensure that you know what new that you've turned on. Some of the different items you may not use and see right now. I tend to have discussions like these where I can point back to statistics that most users only leverage about 25 to 30% of the features of a different system. The more that you can conduct an impact analysis of new functionality up front, the more you can see what you really have and what you've purchased, and allow you to get the most bang for your buck. And related to that, ensuring that you're testing very frequently of any of these new changes. And again, for this, in terms of reviewing the process, the same is true for those of you that are life sciences organizations or on a validated environment. Making sure that you're understanding each of the key updates to each of the different releases is both going to help you from a successful rollout perspective as well as a communication perspective, which I've highlighted as number 9. The end user communication, as you are looking at the rollout and ensuring that the users are understanding what they're getting and why they need to use it and what the benefits are, is going to help with the buy-in perspective. And also making sure that you're understanding the communication protocol between the different teams. Most organizations, most services companies like ourselves look at work streaming the implementation. So you'll see a work stream team that's working on your succession rollout or your employee central rollout or your learning rollout or your jam rollout, et cetera. When you are looking at it from that perspective, the key from that is making sure that everyone is communicating with each other. I see a reminder of a question that just popped up that I did not see, but that is when SuccessFactors has their quarterly releases, does it affect any customization that you've made? It's a loaded question. How I'm going to answer that is that the customizations that you have should be limited. The SuccessFactors does a vetted and review process of any customizations that you have, but most of what you have will be related to different interfaces that you've made. I highly recommend when you are looking at the quarterly releases that any of the customizations be reviewed as part of that impact analysis. The rationale behind that is that you're going to see what you've already built and what the new change will be. Most of the quarterly releases are enhancements, are additional features, additional functionality, and not items that would break. About once a year, I've seen traditionally, you'll see a change that's so strong that it's caused tweaks to be made on the back end that will require a different approach. So I definitely do recommend, in answer to that question, to keep an eye on your customizations as part of that quarterly review. And again, sorry, I think I may have clicked the slides through too quickly. Again, when looking at the communication, I come back to the regional local approach. From a communication perspective, you have to be very, very cognizant, on the languages that you're supporting. and making sure that you are looking at the language packs and how the translated verbiage is going to be considered. Please feel free to continue to ask questions as I move on to a case study from a global perspective. Okay. Case study that I'm going to focus on today is one of our global customers that is located in Dubai. And some of the items that we found that have been successful related to their implementation. To give you a little bit of background, this customer has been in the process of rolling out employee profile, JAM, learning, and succession. Before I get into that a little bit deeper, I did just see a question pop up related to specific considerations around language packs and translated verbiage. So the key with that on the language packs, there are a large number of language packs that are available and come with the package that you purchased. There are some languages, depending on the size of your organization, that have to be created ad hoc. When you are getting into the translated verbiage is going to be typically around any changes that you've made to your interface that are outside the standard SuccessFactors interface. You're going to have to take those tags and get those specific tags translated. My recommendation, if you have deeper questions on translation, is to, at the end of this, my information will be posted, and I can probably spend about an hour just talking about the different translation things you need to look at. But going back to my global case study, this customer of ours in Dubai is rolling out employee profile, JAM, learning, and succession. And for them, it is their first enterprise-wide human capital management system. And for a customer of 44,000 employees in 29 different countries, there's a lot to look at and a lot to really make sure that is being accounted for as you're looking to ensure that the solution is going to be scalable and ready for, again, 44,000 employees in 29 different countries. How we focused on this to ensure success was looking at the overall approach and going back to that best practice around stakeholders and around seeing the best way to ensure a phased implementation plan. We put together a strategy related to going with a workflow or swim lane approach to both managing and overlapping the modules as the work was being performed. And we did an extensive amount of business process mapping. A lot of that becomes critical with the larger global rollouts as you see differences in business processes across the different regions. Starting with the business process mapping before getting into the configuration workbooks really allows for an understanding of the business need. We also tend to strongly push pre-configuration workbook training. The last thing you want to do, especially on a global implementation, is go into your workshops related to your configuration workbooks not knowing the system. And when I say not knowing the system, I don't mean not knowing the system like your vendor may, but just really not making sure that you have seen or participated in more than just the high-level demo of what the system can do. There's lots of great training available for customers by SuccessFactors partners and vendors that really allow you to make sure that you have enough background to make the necessary decisions. One of the other keys that we focused on the keys that we focused on was around their social strategy. So for that, it became key to look at how social was going to be leveraged across the regions and across the cultures. A number of their users in the different regions were not as technically savvy as others. So putting everything out there in terms of, forced collaboration wasn't necessarily helpful. So really understanding which of the regions would be able to embrace social and which of the regions would go with a more traditional approach really allowed for stronger implementation support. I see a question related to an earlier slide where we mentioned 50% contingent workforce. When we have that related to this UAE case study, the split was not 50%. I believe the split was closer to about 25 or 30% of the 44,000 employees, which impacted some of our decisions around the social strategy, as well as around the platform suggestion components in terms of how mobile would be handled, et cetera. We also made sure to leverage key regional representation in UAT testing process. Again, this comes back to think global, act local. With having a contingent workforce in play, with having some of the countries not as technology or technically savvy as others, made it key to ensure that there was regional buy-in from our customer prior to larger global decisions being made. A number of our customers like to tout themselves on having a decentralized centralization, and I saw that to an extent with this customer just off of the number of countries that were in play. Decisions were being made at a global level, but with good, strong feedback from a local, regional perspective. Again, these are all great questions. Please continue to ask them, and I'll try to make sure that I'm answering them within the construct of the session. Related to lessons learned from this implementation, my key takeaway from talking with our implementation team, one of the things that helped them the most was around the social strategy. And from a next time we do a larger rollout, especially in MENA, is how to look at incentives for participation. When you're getting into different regions, how to ensure that people are not just viewing this as something that's getting forced down by corporate, how to make sure that you're incentivizing the people on your advisory boards, on your governance teams to stay actively motivated, and identifying who those champions are going to be, both for example, if you're rolling out JAM, leading some of those discussion threads and becoming more of the farmers of the site in terms of really ensuring that the tool's being used properly. As I mentioned, one of the key for successes that we had was ensuring that both HR and IT were involved, and they were really essential and have been essential. Some of these modules are still getting rolled out. This is an active customer for us that is still evolving, and with that, we're taking a lot of these best practices and ensuring as more and more of the modules are getting completed, that they're getting completed in a way that fits in that overall global approach, as well as continues to fit in that work stream or swim lane type approach. And then I mentioned earlier with that global diagram in terms of your data. One of the key questions that was asked early on by our customer was which data center, and that's come up a lot more just in terms of questions and concerns from our customers around speed of service, around reliability, around data privacy laws, especially for a MENA-based customer. So when I look at that, I took away, because these are some of the questions that we even knew to ask them that our customer asked before we even got to the table. The time zone also is key when you're looking at setting up meetings for global implementations. I know personally I've been supporting projects in the Nordics while on the West Coast and the East Coast, and finding that right time to ensure that meetings are working. When you are dealing with a larger disparate group, and depending on where your vendors are, ensuring that the meeting time is flexible for all, and in that situation what tends to happen is having some flexibility to make sure that it's typically convenient for everyone. So, some nights it's going to be a 9 o'clock meeting for one group, and then other nights it'll be a 9 o'clock meeting for them, just to make sure that you're keeping all of the teams engaged and involved for moving forward. So when I look at it from that perspective, that was one example. I'm going to give another example before we move over to questions that I don't have in the slide, and that's related to one of our customers in the UK. This customer has getting support from us both from their U.S. As well as from the UK, because they went with separate instances. They decided to standardize on the platform, but went with a U.S. Implementation as well as a UK implementation. And for us, our key was to make sure that there weren't any changes that were getting made that would restrict them from going to one instance in the future versus really having that protective, isolated system approach. So as we were providing support to both, the more that we were able to get communication to occur between the different countries and regions, the easier it has been for them to manage costs from a long-term upgrade perspective as they look to get to a one-size-fits-all approach, while at the same time still giving the individual regions the ability to have that localization, the global approach, the global thinking, the local delivery. Now, one of the questions that I get asked is around their approach in terms of separate instance. I tend to not recommend that. Under certain conditions, do I recommend it? Let me go first into the why I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it because it can create a spider web of systems related to how access is going to be granted when you get into other global rollouts across the board, and then other things from a single sign-on perspective, from a reporting perspective. I have found that organizations that truly have separate philosophies, separate systems, like if you've already got your own separate HR tool and you're not standardized on an HR tool, standardizing on talent may not necessarily be the right time. You may want to go separate instances, but most of the organizations that we have that have, say, for example, seven different systems are consolidating down to one. And making sure that you're tying that into your overall approach is going to be key. And some of it is cultural. I know for us that we've got customers that are going to be in Germany, that are going to be in countries where they are very specific around their data and where their data resides. And in those situations, we do see ad hoc requests and tend to agree with the requests for additional instances, and a lot of that is being driven by business processes and by security requests.